say that I have a meeting like that coming up in September. It'll be awful.
All right. All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We might as well get rolling, let people filter in as they see fit. Thanks for joining today. I really wanted to take the opportunity at the conference to go over some, I think, well, I view them as sort of lingering issues, but there's some issues around how we manage the suite ontology and how it's governed and how we make decisions. And also, take the opportunity to get perhaps some feedback or some more ideas around what types of things would be useful in terms of checkpoints on a suite roadmap. So what types of functionality would this community be looking for if it's not already there? I found that sort of in doing some background research on sort of governance and chatting to Bruce a bit, which you'll hear more from him later, that I've decided to pivot to a more of a discussion. And I'm going to throw up some slides here in a minute. Actually, I'll just put them up now. Give me a moment here to share my screen. And just because it's easier for me, let's do that. So I just want to confirm you guys can see this. You can see slides coming through?
Yep.
Thank you. So anyway, I wanted to pivot slightly and present or just give you some slides around basically a little bit of context in introductory remarks, but then discuss some of the sort of an abridged version of a survey that we sent out around the suite ontology and semantic resources in general, as it applies to suite anyway. So the results sort of contextualize a bit. And then do a breakout and chat about it a little bit. So hopefully then we can hear from you, from the community, irrespective of whether or not you participated in the survey or not, but perhaps have a bit more of a discussion around the utility of suite and perhaps what we'd like to do with the resource. And then Bruce is going to chat a bit about, I think, governance, sort of perhaps governance models or the types of things that are successful, at least with the experience sort of in the room, the types of qualities is how I think of it, that are that typically are indicative of a successful self-run sort of community or organization or project. And then I would like to have another breakout. So apologies, I forgot to move the one breakout, but anyway, after Bruce talks, then we'll have an opportunity for questions and then either discuss in a room all together or have breakouts where we can sort of discuss in a bit more detail with each other and then report back to the larger group and see where there's alignment and so forth. And then as for all these sessions, we'll see if we can grab 3 takeaways at the end and just some concluding remarks from my side, or well, from anyone, but I'll lead that portion. Well, actually, and before we get started, I just wanted to emphasize that I'm sort of hosting this, if you like, but I'm really doing it sort of on behalf of the community. So the semantic technologies community and the community of volunteers that are curating and working on suite currently. So I'm really just the moderator, hopefully. So just a little bit of context in case this is new to you or this isn't information that you already have. So SWEET is an acronym for the Semantic Web for Earth and Environmental Terminology, right? So it was initially developed, I think, starting around 2001, actually, by Rob Raskin. And after he had passed away, NASA JPL sort of sat on it for a while, not sure what to do, and they ended up releasing it to the public domain in 2017, at which point Louis McGibney migrated it over to a GitHub repo under the CC10 license, and there's been a community of people that have been working on it ever since. Most of them, I think, are in the ECIP Semantic Technologies Committee or affiliated somehow. Not all of them, but I think most of them do. And I think recent discussions have highlighted some changes that I think we like, at least a group of us would like to see. And perhaps more abstractly, we'd like to figure out how we go about making those changes. So how do we make decisions, right? And then how do we document and then implement them in a way that is sort of structured, that everyone can follow. And just a bit more context, that's in the hope that we can, that community can grow, and we can have a framework by which domain experts feel like they can come in and they know sort of how to contribute and, pardon me, and what is expected. So the goals for this session, I realized on the Schedule page, I put that I wanted to make some decisions, and that is part of the pivot. I had read some comments about previous ECIP sessions, and decision making seemed to be, I don't know, frowned upon, but there were some definite comments that it wasn't a positive experience. And so I thought I'd just change slightly and say, well, let's have a brainstorming session around these two topics. Loosely, these two, there are a couple questions here, for example. So what goals should be on the suite roadmap? And from your perspective as the community involved in this session, what would enhance the utility of suite for you in the work that you do? And then the second one, so what does a governance framework or a framework for suite community self-governance entail? So what are those qualities of a successful self-governed community or project? And then how do we, what is the mechanism by which we implement them? Is it, might we tie it to a technological solution? Might it be just a community, a series of decisions that need to be made and then laid out and well documented, that type of thing. And then after the ellipsis, I just wanted to make sure you know that, so this information, I'd like to sort of synthesize it and bring it back to the Semantic Tech Committee, as not everyone is going to be able to attend this meeting, and then use that to make some change. See what kind of actions follow that, what we can draw out of that. So quickly, I'd like to run through just a synthesis of responses from the suite survey that we sent out. This was around, I believe it was January to Feb, if I remember correctly, of this year, just to clarify. And one of the reasons that there was a group interested in this survey was to better understand who the community is, like how many members, and if they chose to share the information, who was in that community. And also, broadly speaking, of the community members, or in this case, just the respondents, how many actually use Suite? And then how is it used? And we also, I think, took the opportunity. So I think we wanted to ask questions that were Suite focused, but we took the opportunity to ask some other questions around, sort of broadly speaking, semantic resources, and figure out or ask questions around the types of qualities that are valued. Okay, I'll get into that in a moment here. And I do want to note that this is the same as in the links that you'll find to the responses that are the response document. For the purposes of the survey, we defined a semantic resource as synonymous with a semantic artifact, semantic model, a knowledge organization system, and then listed examples. So I wanted to be clear that we're all working from, hopefully comparing apples to apples, sort of. So in summary, for the survey, we asked 18 questions total, but jumping to the last point, 5 of them were sort of optional personal information. 7 of the questions were around value, semantic resource value assessment and reuse, and 6 of them were more focused on specifically Suite's value or use and reuse. And there were 35 responses total. I will put these slides on the shared page. They're in the document, but I will upload them to Figshare afterwards. But that's the link. So the first part of the survey, sorry, were your views on semantic resources, sort of broadly speaking. We left it broad on purpose, hoping to not guide anyone down a path. And so the first question of the semantic resources you use, which of the following do they include? This is slide 1 of 2. I just organized them into quartiles just as a way to sort of visualize, I think, a little better. And so which of the following do they include? You can see the counts of the 35 responses. The second slide, you can see the counts and the types of information people are interested in. This was, I should mention, this wasn't open-ended. These were just pick as many as you think you need, choose as many as you like. As you see on the bottom, all of the above values are already incorporated into the counts that you see. I just wanted to note how many there were. Oops, apologies. So this one I think is interesting. Which of the following do we consider the most important when assessing a resource? And the top 4, natural language labels, dereferenceable URIs, hierarchical relationships, and persistent identifiers. Suite checks all of those, so that's good news. In the second sort of tier, I guess, if you like, the natural language definitions, provenance, reference to external vocabularies, and specific relationships, so sort of higher order relationships, or more precise relationships. I think that whole chunk is perhaps an area where Suite could be improved, at least in my opinion. I'd love to hear what you guys think when we get to that breakout session. And then here's the second half of that image, sorry. So you can see where governance sits and logical axioms, stable releases, and synonyms and antonyms, which I personally found interesting, but let's see. So we also asked if you've reused any semantic resources as is, right? So without modifying them, list them. Now there were loads, there were 22 responses and there were loads. This is roughly half. I only listed the ones that had more than one response, okay? You can see, again, you can see the full response in the other document. But so for me, I think it's interesting just to see what people find useful and that they'll reuse it. And then follow up further down, we ask which ones that they consider to be the most important or of highest value, leaving that up to the user to decide what value was. And so Envo came in, but out of 35 responses, as you can see, it was quite variable. Only 4. So the highest is 4 with Envo at 4 votes or marks. So it's quite scattered, which I suppose is to be expected when you don't give a quantifier or qualifier for value. And this one, so we wanted to know what the community was using. Like, why are we developing the resource as a community? Why are we developing these resources? See if there's a way to hone in on any specific tasks. And overwhelmingly, discovery was mentioned. So I should mention too that some of these are verbatim and others I have sort of synthesized a block of free text into a term. So like discovery, for example, was sort of the thrust of the conversation in several, even though they may not have said the word discovery specifically. So just a heads up there. Again, the raw results are viewable. So onto the Suite specific questions, and I'll speed up a bit. So this one I thought was really interesting. Do you use Suite? Okay, almost a quarter. And this is one of the ones that you had to respond to. So then with that in mind, then in what way do you think Suite could be improved? And there's it varies obviously, but these are the highlights for me specifically. I think maybe just because it resonates, but improving the hierarchy and the definitions and the documentation of use cases, success stories, those were mentioned more than once, I think more than 3 times. And then the principles and guidelines, and also who's using Suite. was mentioned a few times, not just the success stories. In juxtaposition, I think, to some of the other responses, the rigorous analysis and axiomatization of concepts and relations was mentioned more than once. And the last bullet point, I just liked. It was good. I thought it was a good comment. So, and this I think goes to sort of success stories, but it was phrased well. So I'll leave it there for a minute. All right. Right. So then, any comments specifically about Suite that the respondent wanted to share with the community? And of course, there were oh, I didn't put the total. I believe there were also 22 responses for this one. Making sure it aligns with other things, not just within the earth sciences, increase the visibility, and the need for a specific maintenance team, which I think is interesting, and different maintenance teams for different subjects. So organized hopefully by subject matter experts. Yeah, and again, success stories would be helpful, and because the roadmap is not explicit, that came up several times. Not that specifically, but sort of alluding to that, like where's Suite going, that type of thing. And the optional information, I don't know, it's highly relevant for this discussion, but I just wanted to point out generally the people who responded identified as academic or in a research institute. And they also primarily were well established in their role. I think it was the top one, I believe, was 60%, and the second one was 40%, but I can double check if you need that info. So I thought I'll pause here. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I just want to see if anyone has any questions before we move on. I see there was some. Oh, yes. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Wonderful.
There's a question in the chat there, Brandon.
Oh, sorry. All I saw was yes before when I looked. Thank you, Simon. Is there a project that has some version of subject-specific maintenance teams? Yeah, I think subject-specific, there are, yeah. I think the ones that I know of are not biomedical, but they'd be in the bio-related domains.
And we've had sprints with Suite as well, haven't we? Like the cryo.
That's correct. So the semantic harmonization cluster organizes working sessions to harmonize. Well, Ruth is on the call, so jump in, and Kai and Pierre, jump in if you want. But they have working sessions with subject matter experts that are building. It was some work that Ruth had finalized called GCW's Global Cryosphere Watch. It was a series of of definitions that was then put into ENVO, and I believe now we're working on harmonizing with Suite. So from that perspective, that is a subject-specific curation team or maintenance. I don't know if you want to call it maintenance, but it's definitely subject-specific team.
And I note that since the cryo, at least in the initial efforts, are kind of winding down, there are several other and actually Pierre's here, so he should be talking. Several other specific groups that'll be moving forward on the harmonization front. So there's a workshop, I think it's tomorrow or Thursday, on fire and fire response for and then there's like the soils group, for example.
Yeah, that's right. The agriculture and climate group is I believe the first one, and the soils group. There's, I think, the marine data cluster, and there's also the bio data standards cluster, which I think are probably all in that realm. Interesting. So sorry, from the chat, Ryan McGranahan's saying they've done background work for space science on harmonization exercise, which is, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and the soils crowd, they're, I think, sort of figuring out where they're going to jump in, but absolutely, absolutely, that community would be, yeah, obviously every community is welcome, but that community might be sort of ripe for the for the picking, if you like. Oh yeah, okay. Simon, that's the disaster one, I believe, is the ag and climate cluster. I don't know when the, oh, thanks, Kai.
Yeah, it's Brian Wee and, oh, okay, yes, Brian Wee and that crew are the.
Looks like Kai's given me a link.
Yep, thanks, Kai. So at this stage, what I would like to do is have a breakout for maybe 6-ish minutes. And sorry, I'm looking at my doc here. Oh, sorry, 10 minutes is what I put in my slide. Go to the first breakout document, or you can take notes in the main document if you like. I don't, wherever you're comfortable with. But if you could think about, just from your own work, and obviously some things have been mentioned in the chat, but from your own work, what types of things would be useful to have in Suite? And even right now, I don't even care if they're already in there or not. If you could include why the goal is important, or what it allows you to do, that would be wonderful. Yeah, so Annie, could you help me with breakouts? I think we have.
But I was going to create, I was going to create 4 rooms.
Yeah, that works. You
Okay.
can have an opportunity to sort of meet and greet and then have a smaller discussion.
How long do you want to have everyone in there before I bring them?
I went a little bit long. Let's do it for 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
We can always extend it a little if we want, right?
Okay. Yep. I'll just ping you at 7 minutes.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
32. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Are there any lingering bits of discussion that need to follow up? Otherwise, I'd like to have a look at the document and see if we could just run through what was put in there as a group. I'd like to do that for maybe 5 minutes or so. Please. Let's see, where are we? Sorry, I have too many windows open. Oh, here we go. So group 1 notes the improved documentation. Oh, does anybody from group 1 want to sort of just summarize briefly the discussion?
Why don't you share the screen? Why don't you
Sorry?
share the screen to the document and we'll see them all.
Oh, thanks, Gary. Yeah, I can do that. Sorry, here we go. Okay, so are you seeing it now?
Indeed.
Okay. Does anybody from group 1 want to add anything? Any context around the discussion, around the bullet points? No? Somebody
Maybe
went
not.
off mute?
I think we're good.
Okay, cool, thanks. Thanks for that. No group 2 and group 3. Oh, that was us. Yeah, I've been talking. Ruth or Ryan, do you guys want to say anything?
Well, I think it's captured pretty well in the notes, but
Okay.
both of you guys are interested in terminology and getting the fundamental glossaries organized in a semantically meaningful way. And so, in my opinion, that's all good.
Okay. Yeah, we had a few side conversations in there about current work and so forth. In group 4, I'm just whipping through. So group 4, polar soil. Does anybody from group 4 feel like anything needs to be added?
Really just at the bot. We were just trying to figure out where to start. A lot of us were new to
Okay.
Suite and ontologies in general and was just getting super overwhelmed by the repository and things along those lines.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for putting notes in. No, that's yeah, okay. Sorry, yeah, where does a new person start? That's awesome. Thanks for putting that in there. Yeah, and then group 5, which has several bullet points. Finding sweet spot. Does anybody from group 5 want to say anything or add anything?
We picked up, in previous discussions, this idea of evolving it into something that would help the harmonization activities by gathering definitions from other commonly used glossaries, some of which are not digitized, but they're there and they're very used by the domain experts. That would be a very unique value proposition, which is not done, and it can also support other work, while still not putting too much demands on heavily axiomatizing it. You can keep it quite loose in its hierarchies, but still functional, of course, but a little bit looser, and have it as this thing. I think that came up a few times in previous discussions, and I think most of us like the idea of that. Exactly. And then talking about the technology around it, the stuff that would make it easier to just use, and that goes with the documentation too, as other groups have said. So I think that's quite good. But also the idea of those expert groups or people who actually have the domain knowledge of certain sections of Suite, be it the sensors, noting that it is very broadly scoped. So it lays out a good foundation for Earth and environmental observation, and engaging those groups to take care of those sections, at least making sure the domain knowledge is available for then the semantics folks to work up, would be a good way to set up some workflows and cycles.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Pierre.
I've got a comment about that. If we actually got the multiple definitions part of that going and came to an agreement as to exactly how to do that, one of the things I'm doing for this SMD work is gathering all of the definitions in use in all the interfaces across all of NASA's science divisions, and kind of, semantically looking at them. And it would be great if I had a place to put them. And so, yes, even simple terms like facility apparently has multiple definitions across NASA.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which I think is vastly amusing.
Well, wouldn't that start with a place in NASA to put those things?
Yeah, like NASA has that technology somewhere. I don't have. No, they want it. I mean, their suggestion is put it in a spreadsheet. Yuck.
But I mean, I think that's a great sort of point. If somebody actually has the focus to do that work right now, Ruth in this case, it's a very heroic sort of thing, and there should be a place for it to live.
In other words, I need a place for it to live now. Please give it to me.
Conversely, they could uplift the STI thesaurus to not be something locked away, but that's a conversation for another time. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'll try not to get sidetracked by the comments. So thanks for the discussion, that was great, and thanks for logging it in the session notes. Those comments and questions are going to be very helpful as we sort of further this discussion with the Semantic Technologies Committee. And now I would like to pass over to Bruce. So Bruce Karen, who I think most of you probably know, he's been around ECIP for a while. You were president, you're a lingerer. No, but I actually, I pinged Bruce when I thought about this session, because he has a lot of really good experience and knowledge around sort of governance and community facilitation, and in just generally in that area. And so I thought he might be able to share some points that we might want to discuss, perhaps highlighting areas of success or weakness or whatever. Sorry, Bruce, you go ahead. But I just left some links on here to his personal page, the Open Scientist Handbook, which I think is your most recent thing, even though it's a while ago. Yeah, anyway. So Bruce, if you wanna go for, I'll start sharing, And then,
Right. I don't have like slides or PowerPoints or things like that. Can you hear me first? Is that all right?
For sure.
yep, all good.
And thanks for having me here. I think not having a history of knowing how you've been governing, except for being an ECIP committee and before that a cluster, I can do a couple things. I can talk about governance as a task, and how governance helps a bit, and then I can also talk about experience that we've had taking a cluster and turning it into a full global governance organization with the Earth Archive preprint service. And I've been in various governance making places around National Science Foundation and NASA, and usually these are projects that are required to create communities, and then they're supposed to be self-governed, and mostly they're not. ECIP is the one, I think, huge success story, and that was mostly NASA gave us money to do the governance and just went away and said, "You guys do it," and we did. But again, the committees and the clusters were not necessarily designed to do full-on decision making for something like a software project. And I can recommend, there's a book that's, it's not brand new right now, but Jono Bacon from Unix land did this thing called The Art of Community. And that's a good thing that, it's Jono Bacon. I think it's good to look at governance having both a sort of governing constraint and an enabling constraint. And a lot of times people think of governance as only, constraining through rules and regulations and such. And I think you lose a lot when you get there. A lot of software projects also have what's called a do-ocracy, where people who are doing most of the work have more of a say in how the projects are run. So let me talk about Earth Archive a little bit. We started out as an ECIP cluster, and then we opened up the service based on the Center for Open Sciences platform. And but there were lots of people out there who were not connected to ECIP and would not become connected to ECIP, and living in other countries and wanting to be involved. We decided we would create a volunteer input form. We got a couple hundred people who said they would volunteer on like 4 different continents. And we decided that we would not vote on leadership, but we would use sortition to do both the selection and to do the diversity and inclusion. So people were sorted into different buckets, and then we did selection that represented all of these buckets. Sortition just means random, okay? We use a random number generator. And what this does is it keeps the people who really, really want to be a leader from becoming a leader. And those are the people that sometimes are the last people you want to step into a leadership position, because they have all kinds of other reasons why they want to be a leader. And we've been going now for 4 years with the leadership that's been chosen at random, and it's working out extremely well. The other thing that we do that ECIP has tried experimentally before is that we use the Lumio decision platform. Lumio is it's a piece of software coming out of New Zealand. It was born in the Occupy movement and a little bit from the Pirate Party in Germany, which has their own decision matrix. And it allows the group to propose propose changes, and you can then argue about the proposal and make the proposal better before you vote on it, and then you can actually vote on it. So it's really just taking kind of a cluster approach, but giving you the tools to discuss actual proposals. And we've found that to be extremely valuable in ours. Now, you may want to look at ENVO. I don't know how ENVO is governed, and look at other groups that are familiar with your group and find out if you can have lessons learned from them too. Now, a governing constraint means that you have a boundary around who is in the community and who is not yet in the community. And this boundary can be fairly low threshold. It could be, people sign up to be in the community. But you can also identify a core community. And this is where duocracies are a good model. You can either have it so that there's almost an automatic where you do so many commits and you can become part of the maintainers. So you can set it up at the formula, or you can set it up with invitations for people who are committing to improving the software. And that gives you a maintainer community. And these are both containers. And inside of these, then you want to work on the enabling constraints. You want to work on the culture of these communities, which just really means starting with a vision for what they should be doing, what they want to do, and what the future outcome would be. And then talking about values of how we work together. And so it's a lot of conversations, and it's not tricky. It's really all in my Open Scientist Handbook, which I wrote to help community organizers learn more about culture, which is another description for what enabling constraints are. So community is the box that contains the culture, and the culture is all of that work you do to work better together. And so you could actually have a larger user community, and you could use sortition to create a user council that then responds to decisions that are in process from the maintainer group, and also can come up with their own. They can field requests for new features or other things, and then bring that to the maintainer community. And so the user community can be as large as the number of users you have, and you can just keep growing that. But they don't necessarily need to have a vote. I have to say that ECIP voting has always been a bit of a problem, because really these are volunteer positions, and we just want someone who's going to step in and do the work. And we could have done it through sortition from the beginning, but we haven't. And so that's my main beginning statement. I don't know enough to say, gosh, you guys should look at this or that, but I'm willing to be around over the next 6 months or so, and sit in on committee meetings and things, and point to new resources or other ideas. So let me just leave it at that.
Awesome.
Brandon?
No, yeah, thanks, Bruce. Actually, I was wondering, for for the Earth Archive community, who is operating on Lumio, how do you how do you get to a point like is there a minimum threshold for, let's say, votes? Or if I make a proposal and we sort of craft it, and then you get to that stage, have you encountered that at all, where you need, I don't know, you need 2/3, or you need 10 people to thumbs up, or however you construct the voting mechanism? Yeah, do you have any experience around any of those issues?
So we create these councils, which are like juries. They're chosen from the group, and they represent the group. And so if you have a council that has 13 members of it, a majority there is 7. So
yeah.
And so we don't have just broadcast out to just a community of people who signed up on the website to vote on things. We select a representative groups from them, and then have these vote with a majority. And it's a majority, but you can block it. It's has a little bit of a if someone steps up in the council and just wants to block it, you got to get back and have a discussion.
Okay.
So that's a part of the so you don't have to get 100%. That would be horrible.
Right. Yeah. So, does anybody else have any thoughts or questions at this stage?
Well, this is Gary. Just one, that is a chicken and egg issue to me on this, is that gathering enough resources. In other words, the success is partly because you're able to gather interest and resources. And the question is, do we have enough resources to gather resources, go on, or to grow?
So how many people use, do you have numbers of how many people are occasional users of Suite?
No, so the best thing we have are any inferences you want to make from the survey, and then the logs from the download logs, or the like the trace packs. And there's, I want to say, the last time I looked, sorry, this is from memory, I don't think John Graybeel's on. Anyway, yeah, it was around like 5,000 a month hits. But that was raw. That didn't filter out, like me when I'm doing something and I hit it 30 times in 12 seconds, or what, you know what I mean? So that's with no filter. And that was, I think the average is right around 5,000 a month, and it peaks usually right before each summer or winter meeting. Yeah, so that's all we really have to go on at present.
And how many people have been active on the on the software itself, on the
in the repo, like on building and maintaining and that sort of thing? I'd say commit wise, maybe 6 or 7, but there's a lot more people that were logging issues. So so they're logging issues, and how ECIP clusters and committee meetings, there's lots of people that show up when they're free, and then they won't show up for a few months and they'll come back, and that kind of thing. So I think the community is probably larger, would be my guess. It might be slightly larger than those numbers indicate. I think there's probably, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have the governance discussion. I'd like for there to be a clear way to sort of participate, in hopes that we could, as Gary mentioned, sort of increase that resourcing, if you like, or increase the resource.
My name is Ge Peng, and I'm not familiar with, I just, maybe a stupid question. I just wondering whether it's a way you can see actually people using it, whether it's a citation or linkage or something in that nature.
Yeah, so that's what we're in the process of setting up, using the analytics package that that they're hosted. That is hosted at Stanford, I believe. But yeah, it's setting up and basically to follow all the links all the ontology links, so treating each one separately.
Yeah.
And then as far as citation metrics, I haven't looked at that at all. Sorry, I don't know.
Okay, but actually following that, if you can get the metrics out, that would be a great way to show the impact.
Agreed.
Because a lot of time people implement and in their systems or tools, they don't necessarily to provide a citation. And another way I'm looking at your website, perhaps you can put something in that nature saying if you are using us, maybe put some acknowledgement on your website. I mean, nothing wrong with that. That will be, if you're calling their website, you can put that out as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. There's only 2 or 3 that I think openly acknowledge, shall we say, the use of suite. And for some reason, I can only think of Aries off the top of my head, but there are a few others that I know about. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I wonder if you put that recommendation, they might do that, whether it's a paper or tools or systems.
Sorry, I think my sound cut out. Could you repeat? Sorry, could you just repeat what you said?
I agree. I'm just saying if you put some statement or recommended acknowledgement or citation on the website.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just doesn't think about it.
Right on.
So the question is of how, how many people does it take? I mean, if you have 15 people who are in any way active on GitHub, on the repo, you can have them all in it can be a sortition of everyone. And then if it gets beyond that, then you could, just do a sort. And if someone gets left out, it's just, random numbers. So no one needs to feel like they're left out, but it's just like, you can't get beyond, actually 12 is the magic number that things start getting weird. That's why we have juries of 12 people.
Okay.
So I do have a question, Bruce. And that question's related to your issue of what do you do if somebody's trying to block? Because we actually have experienced that where we basically didn't move forward for more than a year. What do you do about that? How have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think it's like talking them off the cliff. And
but what if they don't want to be talked?
That's a problem. I don't think we've ever had a place. Well, you can always come back and say, well, what is your counter? What is your proposal? We're happy to work with you as long as you have a counter proposal that we all get to look at.
Yeah, I think Ruth, forgive me, assuming we're talking about the same instance, I think that was sort of how it ended, was we can't just not do anything, we should do something. So unless there's a better proposal, and then I think, anyway, I don't mean to cut you off, Ruth, I just...
Yeah, that is a sticky point. And usually that's one of the reasons why you don't have people who really want to, who think they're the only person who can solve the problem. Gee, how's that working out? Only I can save us. So,
right. Yes.
I'm not convinced we're talking about the main problem here. Interesting though it is, very interesting though it is. I more have the feeling that we're not blocked because of our decision-making process. We're blocked because we haven't actually got enough decisions to make because there's not enough work being done.
Okay.
And there's not enough work being done because we actually don't have the resources, because nobody's being paid to work on Suite. And with all due respect, Bruce and Ruth and co, I'm very interested in the consensus and decision-making process. I think it can become a really important issue. I don't think that's the issue we've got with Suite.
So, Simon, I agree. You and Gary have made that point, and I absolutely agree. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to touch on this, when I look through the issues, I see a lot of divergence, right? And there's a particular issue which, in my interpretation anyway, or my estimation, is going to require a lot of re-engineering and trying to figure out where processes sit, for example, or how they are modeled. And how does that stack up with some of the other issues that have been logged, right? And so that was sort of where I was coming from.
Okay.
I can appreciate that we still need people to do the work, but the reason I was interested in the governance was being able to document, this is how we operate, right?
Yeah.
And then
There's a
hopefully
bit of
when
a
we get
chicken and egg
funding,
thing
when we get the
here.
uptake, then we'll be able to, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel there's a bit of a chicken and egg, which is attracting people into work. Obviously requires that they can understand the framework within which they're working with, and that's the decision making is an important part of that. But at the same time, the frustration I see or have is what do we make? We've got so little movement in the main products that we're talking about here, the main artifacts, the ontology or the vocabulary, the semantic resources, that we're not even getting to that point. We're not even getting to exercise alternative decision-making processes because we're not having decisions to make.
Yeah.
This sort of returns to the roadmap argument, in the sense of what is the value proposition, what is unique about it. If that's more clearly identified, I think then more people would be willing to put in work to it. As Ruth said, she needs a place to keep a bunch of definitions she's pulling together from glossaries. If it can serve that purpose, new life comes into it.
Yeah, and I guess to reiterate one of the previous points was, like, if I went to just another ECIP community, right? So ag and climate or whoever, the marine data, any of the other clusters that are sort of either immersed in or dipping their toes into the sort of semantic waters, if you like, and wanted to invite them to come and contribute, right, as subject matter experts or whatever, or link to the thing they're building. I think it would be really hard to explain. Well, not maybe it wouldn't be really hard. Maybe that's just my own thing. So yeah, I can appreciate the chicken and egg thing. But the rationale behind sort of the organization was then that framework then allowing us to, or allowing, the invitation to be extended and having a bit more of the process documented, hopefully clearly. It doesn't help our resourcing, but hopefully it adds more people to the pile.
Yeah, so Simon, I think your issue is really that Suite currently has not agreed to what is it and where should it be going, and there have been attempts to create that, I guess you could call it a roadmap, but literally that process kept getting stalled and no decisions would end up being made. And yeah, so I mean, seriously, I would be using Suite as a definitions thing because I have multiple definitions for lots and lots of terms. I need a place where I can actually do that harmonization of them. And more than that, say, here's how this term varies across these universes.
And do it in public too, Ruth.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I need a place, but I've needed that place now for 4 years. And then we still don't have it. It's very annoying.
So just a question about this, vision of what you would do. From NASA's vocabulary, there are alternate definitions. You would import all of the definitions, and then over time, you would harmonize these by the light axiomization would resolve some of the taxonomic questions and issues between the various definitions. That still sounds like a fair amount of work.
It is, but right at the moment I'm funded to do that work, but I don't have any tools.
I think it also adds to the usability,
Right. I mean,
right? So
right. You need to have a place where the astronomers can realize that their definition of X and the planetary scientist's definition of X and the earth scientist's definition of X, they're all different. And because people keep saying, oh no, we can go to a common model. Everybody can use the same terms. And I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, right, that works.
And the differences are substantive, not merely in the way that they've been expressed, in your judgment, Ruth.
Oh my, sure, yes.
Okay.
Is thermokarst a process or a landform?
Right.
I definitely
Both.
don't want to do the definitions and terms, and I've been waiting for Ruth to take on that so I can just use it. But every time I'm working on something, it seems to end up in that place, the definitions and terms and common terminology. And that seems to be a lot more challenge than I imagined. I keep thinking that's the problem has been solved, but it doesn't seem to be.
So, okay, so I'd like to just circle back a bit. Not that there was all valid, aren't excellent points. Part of what Bruce brought up, talking about sort of having a group, a management group or whatever, I think aligns with, apologies for others, but other discussions around having a manager, like a suite manager, right? Right now having one, and then sort of building out, should we need one or should we need something like that? Something like a group of people. So does that resonate with others? If so, I'm willing to start the application process to try and basically action that. Okay, see if we can get somehow, I don't know if it'd be funded, I don't know if it'd be through ECIP at this stage, I haven't gotten that far. Do you think that that would help in this regard?
I'm sorry, I'm kind of late to the session. What's the responsibility of this manager?
It would be a position or a person with responsibility, one person that instead of, you still have the community, but then there's one person that can kind of, clear out some of the maybe stale issues or resolve PRs, that type of thing. It's sort of like a curator, if you like. So you still have probably people developing, but then you have sort of a curator and somebody that people, basically a point of contact, a person that people can go to. Man, I'm not really explaining this well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you will find that's more of the governance, part of the governance process. The part of roadmap forward to improve suite or usability of suite, would that something be included? Or that's an entirely different issue?
Well, I think it is a different issue, but I think it would have to be included. Yeah, you're basically looking at somebody with some funded time to work on it, I guess, is what it comes down to. And I will also plug that we are going to bring back the suite meetings. So the working meeting, well, we had one, and then I had to go away. I had to go on leave, but we'd like to bring those back so we have at least a time slot where people can come together and work. It's still in kind, it's still your own, it's still a volunteer, but at least it's a slot where people know that there's some people working on this now and I can contribute if I want, or we can work as a group. So anyway, so that we'll pick that up and see if that's popular or if there are contributors to that. Sorry.
So Ryan put a note in about is a prerequisite to having a governance strategy to have sort of the values laid out. And I guess I'm not sure that we have. In fact, I think that actually is the fundamental thing that's being blocked is what is the mission or vision or whatever.
Okay.
Right. Is it going to continue with what Dr. Raskin laid out with this like hierarchical set of terms without definitions, or is it going to transition more into what Simon Cox had suggested of like a place for everyone's glossary terms to get an IRI and be on the web? Those were two visions for it that have either existed or been put forward. Like, what? Sorry to be crude.
Sorry, Kai, you cut out a little bit for me at the end there, but I think you're right. In terms of mission, yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that one. I do know that the idea of Suite being a place to house multiple definitions, that was, I think Ruth was alluding to earlier, that was what was voted on, and that work is in progress. So well, at least there will be PRs around that, right? But then, as been discussed, getting people to check them over and so on is an issue, right?
So potentially that does mean that we agreed that the platform could be used to solve Ruth's problem. But then I guess the challenge is to develop the actual practices around that, right?
That was the thinking, yes.
So Ruth, had you seen it that way?
At this point, it's hard for me to know. I would like to think that that was an actual decision by the group. And you're correct. If that was a decision by the group, then we need to figure out the process so that it could be implemented. So you're right.
So your your specific project needs at the moment, Ruth, could be the Trailblazer.
It could be.
So, all right.
And I agree with Ryan's note about mission and evolution, but you got to have a starting point.
Yeah. I mean, are we just stuck having a hard time getting off the dime here? And you know, if somebody manages to make that first move, I'm looking at you, Ruth, there'll be an avalanche of other people joining in and watching what you're doing and emulating it and copying it.
I need technical support.
Okay.
No, seriously. Yeah, we need to decide, what does that look like? I mean, you had an example of what it might look like, but nobody agreed that that was right. And I don't care what the right answer is. I just want one.
Well, you know, and I
it has to work.
Going back to, you know, the issues that Bruce and Brandon and other people are suggesting here, there's the processes in groups sometimes kind of emerge, you know, rather than be defined in advance, and you know, they get polished as we move along. But I think the opportunity, Ruth, is to actually you know, take some of those patterns that were proposed, which are obviously we're gonna find out that they don't work exactly as expected, but kick the tires here, have a bit of a go, you know, put some straw men down and see. Too many metaphors here, sorry guys. See what the responses are. You know, we're having a meta conversation at the moment, and maybe we could have a more concrete conversation.
Well, I'm not the only person who has this need, because my little working group talked about, I mean, Ryan has this need, and Brandon is actually dealing with the same thing. So personally, I think we should just get together, pick a mechanism and then start implementing it. But I've thought that now for a year.
No, okay, so I'm just gonna try and sort of abstract up a layer or generalize slightly. So I think the group can continue to make the decisions as they come up, right? If that's what we have the bandwidth for. As Kathy mentioned, the unwritten rules of operations make it difficult for new people to navigate. So if we can preserve some of these discussions and maybe I'll take that on to strive to document what we do, what we have done better, right? So this is how you do multiple definitions, for example. This is the pattern that we're using. After we've sorted out how it works, maybe that's the start. Unfortunately, my thinking was, if we can agree, like, are we going to have a vote? Are we going to have a person? Are we going to, you know what I mean? What's the sort of process by which we're going to do this? And maybe we just tackle it. That's what the Semantic Technology Committee meetings become, is tackling issues, right? And trying to make the decisions. Does that, while we get started, does that resonate with anyone else? Does that seem reasonable?
Let me just say, it's a lot easier to do some of the stuff asynchronously.
Okay.
So that people have, that's why a platform like Lumio works well, because you can set up a time frame that's a week or something like that, and people have time to reflect so trying to do this during a meeting. Meetings are good for opening up discussions. They're not really good for closing them down.
Okay. Okay, I have to think about this a bit. One of the other proposals was just thinking about, just having a time frame. So basically, if it sits for a couple weeks or a month, then dropping it, or something like that. I don't know that we can do that, though, as has been mentioned, because of the volunteer and the timing issue. Anybody have any other? Sorry, I'm a bit stuck. Does anybody have any other thoughts?
So I think what I heard was an action item for me to take like 3 terms or 1 or 2 terms that have multiple definitions like this, and use I hope I can find it, the example that Simon gave, and just to see what it would look like, right?
Yeah.
And send it out, or actually, I guess, deposit it into a suite somehow,
Right.
and see what people think. Is that a place to start, possibly?
I'd love to see that, Ruth. I think that would be really, really helpful. And, I know that the patterns that I originally proposed will probably not survive, but they will be a nice starting place and allow people to work on, see why there's problems with what I proposed on the basis of the data that you bring to it. I think that would be really helpful.
I have been looking at definitions of data sets information. I'm not sure whether they will be something as a good starting point for Ruth. Ruth, do you have any particular?
I have lots of terms, but on the other hand, it also sounds like you might have a few terms, and maybe you could do that as well. Mine will all be, we have some cryospheric terms that could be done, but I also have all these SMD terms.
Yeah, my challenge is that, for example, definition, there's a very abstract definition, but then it doesn't really tell you what does that mean for any particular discipline.
Yeah, so I have slightly a different problem. What I have is pretty accurate definitions for terms, but they don't agree depending, each discipline has different definitions, basically. So you need to show how the definitions vary depending on where you're coming from.
Right. That kind of closed the circle. Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I haven't been taking notes in the doc. I've been writing them down on by hand. But if we can leave, I think if we can leave that, Ruth, as an action item. Oh yeah, okay. So I might be able to help you with some of the tech side that you mentioned earlier. And continuing in that regard, sort of, I don't know if it's trial by error. Fire by whatever. I can't think of the, I'm tired. We'll start from there and work our way through and see what emerges. Also reinstating the working sessions and see if we can get some momentum there as well. Oh, that's fine.
Oh,
Great, Simon.
Sorry, what's this, Pierre? Efficiency glossary.
Just in response to the Gapeng comment about data information, etc. Indeed, it is abstract, and in fact, that's often not touched on in many earth science glossaries or data sets, etc. So in HMC, the Helmholtz metadata collaboration, relatively new ECIP member, we're doing that internally. We're building this glossary. We will open it up, but we stress it is for primarily HMC use, just to get the Helmholtz Federation's digital assets in order. But yeah, we'll certainly share a lot of that content. We're scossifying it at the moment, and then we're setting up our Perl server to release it.
okay, that's cool. I wonder whether you or some other group you are aware of that can help me with the, like, define what the information refers to different disciplines. For example, for climate science or weather science or hydrology or cryosphere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also something to pull to the semantic harmonization and also back to the suite conversation.
Yes.
That's exactly where the sort of collection of definitions that Ruth is talking about and Simon, I think that's another good case. I think we should wait and see what this looks like, the straw man that Ruth would set up. And yeah, we can see if then if it will work for that.
That would be great.
Are you guys intending on keeping the structure of Suite as it is now with like a whole bunch of different ontology files? Or would Ruth have to, contribute a little bit to each one? Or how would you structure that?
Oh no, I'm going to take a term that may have multiple definitions, but it's in a defined place in Suite already, like it's a process. So probably my thermokarst example is not a good example for this, because that is both a process and a landform. But so that would be two different branches of Suite. But my goal is not necessarily to make Suite smarter, but to put into Suite, all the definitions of some term, hopefully under where they belong in the current structure of Suite. So there are, like the example I gave of facility, there's probably a Suite related term that is relevant to that is, roughly about places. And all the facility terms are roughly about places, but in different disciplines, those places are defined differently. In one case, it's only about large organizations with lots of people, and in another case, it's about a wreck on the International Space Station. So, it's pretty ridiculous, but you need to be able to show, here's what it means in one place and here what it means in this other division.
So that's one side of the story, one side of the challenge. For my problem, if I come up a set of definitions that are discipline dependent, is this the right group to come to say, okay, what do you think of these definitions? Do you think that they needs to be modified? Or this is not the problem for this group?
I think it's, well, it might be the harmonization group, but that's part of this group as well, sort of. I mean, it's all under the semantic technologies umbrella.
Okay.
Yeah, I also just wanted to, Kai, it may not, I don't think, it sounds like it doesn't apply to Ruth's work, but the notion of having sort of modules and how we address structural changes, for me at least, is still an issue. There's still a lot of things that for me don't make sense. But adding definitions to the terms, I mean, that could help that, right? So right now we're working off of just a term hierarchy and trying to figure out, you know, where should this be, etc. Does that make sense, or does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Brandon.
Sorry. No.
I think you're right there, Brandon.
Oh, okay, thanks.
This is the raw material then, which will lead on to the next step, which is either rearranging the hierarchy or throwing it away altogether.
Right on. Okay. Okay, so I know we have 3 minutes left. Are there any other comments before we break? Okay, I'll give you a minute. And I just want to share this quickly before we go. Not that. I just want to remind everyone that we have our calls, our Semantic Tech Committee calls are the last Tuesday of every month at 4 Eastern. You can find them on the calendar. As I've mentioned, reinitiating or initiating the suite working sessions. And I also just wanted to also mention that we have been working on a project in its infancy called the Serene Federation. This is just initially a place where we can sort of organize and perhaps develop a registry of earth science, earth and environmental science, semantic resources. We also are meeting to discuss what this is, how we might implement it or instantiate it. And that is, it also meets under the Semantic Technology Committee umbrella, but it's on the second Tuesday of every month, and all are welcome to attend. I will upload the slides, and I just want to say thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Bruce for sharing. Thanks for the contribution for everyone that involved. I appreciate it. And if there's nothing else, have a good rest of the conference.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.